Prince Charles asked to come and see Joan because we knew him.
Stop.
And so he came and he sat with her in the garden, and the first thing he said to her, this was 3 weeks before she died, he said, "My dearest Joan, it has been an absolute honour and privilege to have known you." And she instantly, quick as a whip, put on a Cockney accent and said, "I'm still here." So
I am here today with the absolutely extraordinary Richard E. Grant. And my brain is exploding because, really, honestly, he is my favorite. He is my favorite actor. He came to fame with the classic Withnell and I, and he has gone on to star in Gorgeous and Funny, and he can play sort of affronted like no one I've ever seen. My very favorite movie I've seen recently is Can You Ever Forgive Me?, for which he was nominated for an Oscar. And he's also a gorgeous author. He wrote a beautiful book about grief and love and marriage, and I cannot wait to talk to him today. Richard, what a gift to me. Thank you.
thank you very much.
I love that the story of your career is so intertwined with the story of your marriage when you met the absolutely spectacular Joan. If you wouldn't mind starting at the very beginning, what did you think of her when you met her?
It was 1982. I was 26 years old. I had been unemployed for 3 months. So I was working as a waiter in the theatre district, Covent Garden in London. And an agent said to me, there are so many dramas being made about the Northern Irish troubles at the moment, and you're 6 foot tall, you have blue eyes, you could play Northern Irish. What's your Belfast accent like? And I said, "Debatable." And he said, "Right, you have to go and get lessons, young man." So I found out from another actor that I'd met, and she told me there's a woman called Joan Washington at the Actors Centre, which gives basically almost for free classes. And she was doing a 6-week course of regional British accents, including Belfast. And if you can call Belfast British, these times of, you get cancelled in 2.5 nanoseconds, no matter what you say. So I went along and I found a very short-haired, crop-haired, like Laurie Anderson had a big hit that year with Oh Superman. She was in a boiler suit with a big belt, kicker boots, and a no-shit Sherlock attitude. She had a deep brown, gravy voice that was incredibly delicious to listen to, and she's very charismatic. And I then, at the end of the 6 weeks, asked if she could coach me privately to sort out because I grew up in Southeast Africa in what was a British protectorate called Swaziland, which has now been renamed a year ago, Eswatini, if she could iron out those sounds. And she said, "Well, you sound perfectly normal to me." And I said, "Well, no, people have said that I sound like somebody speaking English in the 1950s. So can you bring me up to speed in the 1980s?" So I had a couple of sessions with her and then didn't hear from her again. Thought, well, that was it. And then in January 1983, she left a voice message for me saying, would I come to her house and put a whole lot of dialogue from a play that she was coaching on the Royal Shakespeare Company, which required a Siswati accent. And she knew that I spoke Siswati fluently. So she said, if you do that, I'll cook you dinner in exchange. So she did. And I didn't go home that night. So essentially a conversation that began in bed in January 1983 ended in bed holding each other's hands at 7:30 on the 2nd of September 2021 when she died. So we had 38 years together. So that's a very long answer to your short question.
I love that you describe love, though, as like never ending the conversation.
Yeah, never ending the conversation. And never not sleeping with each other in the same bed. I think that's as simple as it is. So she had a rule that we would never go to bed on an argument, even if we had an argument. And that I think about 2 months after we'd got together, I took umbrage at something that she'd said, and she said, "Are you sulking?" I said, "Hmm." She said, "You're sulking, aren't you?" And I'd learnt, epic sulking skills from my mother, because it was such an effective weapon on my father.
Oh.
And she said, "If you try that on me ever again, you'll be out the door." And I was so taken aback that somebody called me on this
All right.
well-honed technique that I never tried it again. Yeah, it was brilliant.
It is so wild that when you need to just, what's the one line, like, well, I could learn you. Like when you love someone, then you start to learn them. And then maybe
Yeah.
that you have to unlearn the other patterns of especially parental love that you've known.
Yeah. Yes, you've got to. Yes, I'd never heard it put quite like that, but it's absolutely true.
When you're describing loving Joan, I love how much, though, that you had these, like, amazing habits, though, of being in it with each other with, like, funny little code words at parties.
Oh, yeah.
To let people know, like, well, to let each other know.
Oh, she used to do this on her. She would put her forefinger across the front of her nose when it meant, "I am bored to sobs. Get us out of here now." And if I had told, or she told the same anecdote, which happens after 38 years together, at the same time, she'd just go, "Banana, banana," and that had to stop you in your tracks. You just, even if you were mid thinking, "God, I'm getting the punchline," and people are going to be overwhelmed with joy hearing this anecdote, you go, "Oh no, banana, we've heard it before." And if we were at junk markets or antique fairs or things, or just anywhere in a crowded street and trying to find each other, we made bird noises. So, because you can do it without moving your mouth. You go, "Doo, doo, 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 doo." And then I'd hear, because she was 5'3", and I'm 6'2", or was, and then I'd hear "Doo, doo, 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 doo," over there, and then we'd know how to find each other.
I love the love that's like endless learning, and like it's just like the inside joke, it just gets more and more and more specific.
This is absolutely true. Yeah, and we heard somebody on a radio program talking about how she always ended or stopped a row, kind of accumulating its snowball effect of horror, so that it's like you open the Pandora box and said, "Well, you know what you did 5 years ago, and you said this," and she said she used to just do dog noises, so barking. So we got to the point where, in the last 3 years of our marriage, if things got a bit rough, one of the two of us would just go "woof," and then we knew we had to stop. If the other person was going, "Yes, but you said that, woof," and that just stopped it in its tracks. So I recommend it. Works.
That's so good. My husband and I have this horrible thing where when both people are in a bad mood and the other person can't rally the other,
Yeah.
we do this thing where we sort of stand with our feet very far apart and lean our shoulder weight against each other and try to make the worst sound that's ever been made.
Oh.
And it always sounds, I mean, just unlistenably pathetic, but being mutually pathetic somehow feels like if the timing's just right, it cancels each other out.
Oh, have you ever done this other one where even if you are feeling World War II level of rage towards your most beloved partner, you hold their face when they're really angry with you, and you just say, "I love you." It drives them even more insane. And then you keep saying it, "I love you. No matter what you're saying to me, you wish me dead and flayed alive, but I love you." And eventually it sort of, it works, because it's so ludicrous, shouting. And then, 2 days later you think, what were we even arguing about?
I like too that you knew each other in the before times, like before you were famous. She was the fancy one first.
Yeah,
right?
she was top dog accent dialect coach at the Royal Shakespeare Company, and she'd coached on Barbara Streisand's directorial movie Yentl, and she was really, really established, and I was an out-of-work waiter in Covent Garden. So it could not have been more extreme, our career trajectories at this point in time.
There's a trust in that. The like,
Yeah, I think it's just called falling in love with somebody, and that you hope and believe that they're not going to be a waiter for the rest of their lives, their days. Because all her friends said, "Oh, watch out for him. He's 9 years younger. He's probably a gold digger on the make." And for goodness sake, if you do ever get married, sign a prenup. And to her credit, she dropped all of them and stuck with me. And in a very female way, she only told me about 5 years later that this had actually gone on. Yeah, she protected me.
She must have been so proud of you, though, when your career exploded on the scene.
She was, but then she also, by the same token, she found that very frustrating because having been the most visible and successful person in the relationship, then when I got public recognition, she was then treated like a pane of glass.
I see.
I remember we were at dinner in LA and sitting with very fancy people, and unbeknownst to me, a producer turned and said to her, "What do you do?" And so she said in a sentence, and he literally turned his entire body away from her, didn't speak to her for the rest of the evening. I.e., you're of no consequence and no importance and no value to me, so why should I bother? So I think she found that, it culminated in her, 2 days before flying out for the Oscar ceremony 5 years ago, she said, "I know that you're going to be upset with this, but I'm not coming." And I was apoplectic. I said, "What do you mean? This is like the golden moment of my life. I know I'm going to win, but, just going there and being in that room with all those people." And she said, "No, I will be pushed around and people will be trying to get to speak to you and, go with our daughter instead because she'll enjoy it." And of course she was right. But I was furious. I thought, whoa. But I understand why she did it.
The fact that you seem to bring so much self-knowledge to love, I think, is what struck me about your description of her and funny things she would say to you. I mean, that is an incredible amount of like, this is who I truly am in the midst of...
But isn't that what love is? That you are more open and vulnerable to that person that you're in love with than anything else imaginable. And that's what everybody seems to want to find, don't you think?
Yes. Well, not if they have to be really known, though, because then what if it's... I mean, that's not a very flattering thing, to be that known. I just think it's just so wonderful when I see it, though, in other people.
Yeah, but do you not feel that your partner knows you? You are known to that person in a way that no other person knows you quite like that.
I'm trying to think of the, it reminds me, of course, there's always a German word for something, but it's like one of the synonyms for loved that I thought is exactly what you're describing. It was...
the opposite of Schadenfreude.
Yeah, it's the word of, like, to have been beheld. And, like, that when you love someone, you have to have been beheld.
Yeah.
And, like, that they can see all the layers.
Yeah.
All the colors. And I think that has got to be...
The full onion.
Yeah. The full onion. I like that. I think that to me really is the perfect definition of love.
Okay.
Sometimes people feel like they are strangers to one another when they're both in a season of grief, that they might be in the same room, but they're exiled to different planets. Was that a time of like you were both having wildly different experiences, or did you feel like you could keep sort of reweaving your experiences?
I think because we had been through 9 months of COVID, living literally in each other's pockets 24/7, in a way that we never had during our entire marriage. So in hindsight, that was an unbelievable bonus and benefit to have gone through that, because it was immediately followed by the last 8 months of our life. So the most challenging part, which is why I kept such a forensically detailed diary, which is the base of the memoir Pocketful of Happiness, is that that you get to a point where, as I'm sure you have experienced, I imagine, where the carer, which was my role, no matter what you do, it's never enough or it's not good enough. So you're giving 5,000%, and still the person who is terminally ill, which is my wife, would be critical from a state of frustration, terror, or exhaustion, or a combination of all three, so that you then have to dig in the deepest reserves of your love to go, this is not what the person really feels.
Yes.
This is, as a result, if I was in that situation and just flailing against feeling that you have no hope of ever recovering.
Yeah. Yeah. We can have such a romantic view of caregiving. I mean, from the outside, I've heard people say it. They say this one version of it. Honestly, it drives me crazy. That goes, and it's usually if they've experienced a short season of caregiving, and it was very meaningful. They go, well, everything that I put in, I got back, as if there's always some kind of wonderful exchange going on. And yet, any person I've ever talked to who's done long form, digging deep kinds of "I will be with you," they can testify to moments of sweetness, moments of tremendous ugliness, moments of medical fear, moments of medical disgust. Like, it's such a wide gamut of, like...
It's brutal because you can't varnish or soft pedal anything. If you're having to bath somebody and change them and do all of those things which come towards the end of a life, it's as animalistic and basic as you're ever going to get, I think.
Yeah.
And what I've found so schizophrenic about it is that a week before Joan died, when we'd been told it was probably going to happen in the next 10 days, you're sitting with the person living and breathing, but you're having to literally, while I was sitting with Joan, I would be funeral shopping on my phone. And she would come, she was in and out of consciousness or sleep. And it felt so treacherous to do that.
Yeah.
But what was the alternative?
Yes.
You can't ask somebody or I didn't feel that I could ask somebody to do it on my behalf. Yeah. Because even that is going to require a conversation. Yes. So I found that really, really bizarre and odd. And on the one hand, you long for the person to die so that they are relieved of any more suffering. But at the same time, you know that simultaneously, the moment of the moment they die, your suffering really begins. Yes. So but everybody has to face end of life, and I think that I felt a genuine sense of privilege that I was with her as she had asked me to be right up until her last breath. I was still talking to her and still stroking her hand. So, when somebody says to you, as my wife said to me, I don't want to die in a hospital, and I don't want some gruesome chemotherapy that's going to make what time I have left even worse. So that being able to feel that you could honour that promise seemed so unlikely to happen, but it did. And I'm very grateful for that. And how calm it was and unfrightening when the final afternoon of life happened is something that I didn't anticipate, because I'd seen from movies or, the sort of urban legend is that you're going to hear the terrible death rattle or they're going to break wind violently. Yes. And she used to joke with me. She'd say, for God's sake, if my last breath is basically a big fart, don't write that in your diary. And it didn't happen.
You steal your pen right now, sir.
Yeah, it just didn't happen that way. You know what I mean? It was extraordinary.
Did it feel like an extension of that gentle and not gentle honesty that you've had the whole time, where it was like, look at us still loving each other.
Yeah. What was curious is the undertaker, when I'd spoken to him on the phone the day before because we anticipated it would be a day earlier than the actual day that it happened. It would be the 1st of September rather than the 2nd. He said to me, and the palliative care nurses had said the same thing, that hearing is the last sense to go. So talking, even when the person, even after she'd stopped breathing, my daughter and I talked to her for an hour. And obviously it was for our benefit. But I suppose in that moment you suspend your disbelief that there is nothing more. And just thought, well, if you talk, it helped us.
Yes. That makes perfect sense to me, to feel like you're being, like, this is how we are in relationship. Look at us. This is how we talk to each other. And then to be able to have tenderness toward her, I just...
And the undertaker was amazing because he said when he arrived, and he was really old school Englishman, from the countryside, he said, would you mind if I talk to Joan while we're preparing everything? And I said, yes, go ahead. And he said to her, Joan, we're now going to wrap you in the folding sheet, and then we're going to lift you onto a stretcher, and then we're going to put you in the car, and we're really going to look after you. And it sounds so bonkers now when I repeat that, but his calmness and him just speaking to her and explaining, and because she was very, very pragmatic, I thought, well, she would have found this extremely amusing, but also grateful that she was being told exactly what was going to happen. So there's no mystical, we're taking you off into the ether and any of that stuff. It's you're going to be wrapped up and you're going to be lifted up and you're going to be put in the back of a car and I'm going to take you off and we'll take all your jewelry off. Don't worry about that. It's not going to be thieved from your box.
Yes. I know only one undertaker, Thomas Lynch, who's also a poet. And it sounds exactly like how he would talk to people. It's so, it's got a frankness, but also like an acknowledgement to it. Like that there is no body, that there is a beloved.
Yeah. He came back a week later, after the cremation, which is the word that I hate more than any other in the English language. And he had a Hessian bag with a box of ashes. And he handed it over at my front door, the cottage where we were living in the countryside, and he said, this weighs approximately the same as a baby when it's born. So, and then he handed them over. And they're the one thing that she had said to me, I'd like my ashes to be underneath a cherry tree in our garden. And 2 years and a month later, I still haven't been able to do that. And I think I'm unlikely to ever do it. Somehow just having what is remaining of her in a box, because I sort of think, well, if I sell this cottage, or we move, or something else, or the tree falls down, or there's a storm, somehow I know where she is more, but just by having her in that box.
I want you with me.
And it's completely irrational, but just sentimental.
Yeah, I mean, all poetry has to be, right?
I suppose so.
Entirely. It's the only way it makes any sense is that it doesn't make sense.
But there's another part of me that just think, well, maybe the cat or something's going to knock this box over, and then I'll have to scoop her off the floor, which again she would find amusing.
Yes.
For God's sake, get rid of me.
You had a couple I'm just thinking about how people experience the story of themselves, and people's love poured out for her in food and letters to her and phone calls, and it sounds like you really everybody let her know how beloved she was before she was gone.
Well, she was Scottish, from Aberdeen, and so Calvinist, you know, stoical. You know, don't share anything. The opposite of my sensibility, and that was the only real argument that my daughter and I had. I think 2 or 3 weeks after she was diagnosed in January 2021. And we said, we have to tell people. And she said, I'm going to carry on FaceTime or Skype coaching Brendan Gleeson, Ray Fiennes, and
Wow.
Javier Bardem, with the 3 actors she was working with at the time. And we said, it is an impossible burden on us not to be able to tell people what you're facing. And she was furious, and she said, no, she didn't speak to both of us for 24 hours. She went into a sulk. And so we went ahead and emailed and texted the 30 people closest to us. And the avalanche of love, support, food, flowers, you know, messages, phone calls, visits that we had instantaneously completely buoyed up her spirits. And she was astonished by that. And she said, I owe you both an apology because I had no idea that people held me in this kind of esteem. And I said, well, you know, you and I had joked because of our age. All the memorials or funerals that we had gone to, we've always said, God, if the person in the box could only hear what everybody was saying about them. Because in real life, I'm sure they never knew they were being eulogized at this level.
Yeah.
And so she came round to that, and she was very, very grateful for that. And on days when she felt really low, somebody's visit or flowers or food parcel or whatever would just buoy up her spirits, no end. So I think that's really important.
I do love feeling like people we love get to be told the story of who they are, because we forget.
Yeah.
We don't know.
Oh, yeah.
We only know a part of how we're just part of the fabric of other people's, you know, and their own self-identity. I remember I did have one version of that went badly because that first year everyone thought I was going to die in June, and so people were very, very kind in wanting to let me know how much they meant to me. But I meant to them. But there's one guy who wrote me a letter, and it was like all in the past tense. And he was also, I think, kind of what wounded my pride was he was really good looking. And it was like, dear Kate, you were so lovely. Damn it, Derek. I can still be pretty again. I mean, it just got me in the weirdest place. Like, why am I arguing about this? But it's because I needed to still feel like I had a little more runway left. I think, too, something funny about, I mean, I don't know if any of us even know how old we are. We're just,
yeah.
But I think in those moments I lost my youth at the same time as I got sick, I think, to other people, which is also but then I in being kind of not this, you know, a 30-some-year-old anymore, just a person in people's lives, I think people told me things that they never would have told me otherwise, and that became a great privilege.
Yeah.
I felt like I suddenly got like the drone view of whatever.
It's interesting
my
what
life
you said
was.
about people speaking to you or writing to you in the past tense. It's like you'd already gone, because Prince Charles asked to come and see Joan because we knew him.
Stop.
And so he came and he sat with her in the garden, and the first thing he said to her, this was 3 weeks before she died, he said, my dearest Joan, it has been an absolute honour and privilege to have known you. And she instantly, you know, quick as a whip, put on a Cockney accent and said, I'm still here. So, and of course he had done it with, you know, because people don't know what to say.
Yes.
He'd done it
You
with the
were
best
great.
intentions, but he wanted
Screw
to tell
you.
her how great she was, but chose the past tense. But it broke the ice, so, you know, it worked well. And I think it's very difficult for people
Yeah.
don't know what to say or are fearful of saying the wrong thing.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know whether you had this, but I very regularly saw people that I knew really well, or thought I did, who crossed the street rather than speak to me. And some people who have never acknowledged that she's died, have literally dropped off the cliff face. 98% of people have been beyond extraordinary in their compassion and response. But that 2% that dropped off, I will never speak to ever again, and they know exactly who they are.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Did you experience that?
When you said it, it's going to the place of the sliver of iron in my heart because
Oh yeah.
I remember one person in particular. As I did have, I mean,
Who's a
people
great
who-
friend of yours,
Yeah,
apparently.
and yes, great, great.
Yeah.
Apparently, it is funny that people's fear of being wrong, feeling awkward, can create the great divide.
Yeah.
And but one in particular wrote me a note later to tell me why, and I felt like the note was so much worse than the. But her explanation was, I was so happy, and you were going to be able to have another child, and then you couldn't, and then you were dying, and then I had this other child, and everything was great for me, and then when I saw your Christmas card, it made me sad. And I was like, that is the most unreflective. I mean, I'm sure those are all things that happened in her mind,
Yeah.
and yet none of those are all of it, because I just would have thought that all of the beautiful things would say amount to what should have been grace for me and my misery.
Yeah.
But instead it was like, well, I didn't want to make you feel bad. I was like, no, this little exchange, I'm afraid, is what made me feel
I saw an actor
terrible.
in a voiceover studio yesterday, and she said she went all sort of goo-goo, little girl voice on me, little Audrey style, and she said, I wrote you such a long email after Joan had died, but I just never sent it.
Useless.
And I thought, well,
Thanks.
that's really helped me.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. When there was a hole in my heart, I could tell it was supposed to have been filled by
Yeah.
what you didn't bother sending.
Yeah.
When you were talking about the sort of emotional schizophrenia between having to live in the present with the person who you love who's in pain, and then having to imagine a future beyond them where you plan funerals, and I think one of the hardest things I have found in grief is knowing how to toggle between those kinds of imaginations. Because, like, for instance, with beliefs about the afterlife, I haven't found it to be, for the most part, terribly comforting to pivot to an eternal future, except every now and then when I feel like I'm trying to learn something about who God is. I rarely find it helpful when I'm trying to make my life more meaningful, to figure out how to love people in a grittier way, to make my life less painful. I mean, I do think people think religion is going to make their life less painful, and I've never found that to be true. I was like, welcome to Christianity. If you're doing it right, our Savior suffers and dies badly.
We may get struck by lightning in this little studio here now on Friday the 13th. No doubt.
So I guess, I mean, I liked too what C.S. Lewis said when his wife, who he felt like he'd waited for his whole life, dies. And he said, well, I'm sure you must find your faith to be very comforting during these times. And he was like, not at all. And I agree. But I do find, like, when you describe finding a pocket full of happiness in the day, I think it's a more sophisticated version than when people say, well, just live in the present. Because I think there's the beauty of being able to reach into your gorgeous past with a woman that you never stopped talking to, and then have a memory like a treasure that you get to hold and recreate. And then there's times in which you do need to switch to a future in which you imagine, like, you have to, most of grief is paperwork as far as I can tell, and then you have to not live in the present quite so much and imagine a time in which it's less painful. But I find that there's wisdom in toggling between them to find, like, where the treasure of that happiness is. And when I read you and think about your brain, that's part of what I heard.
Thank you. Is that a question?
Oh, I was just thinking about it.
Right.
Yeah.
I never thought. 4 days before Joan died, she said to my daughter and I know you're going to be sad, but I challenge you both to try and find a pocketful of happiness in each day. And at the time, I didn't really take on board what she meant, but I think that more than anything, it's been a mantra by which to navigate the abyss of grief. And most significantly, it has permission built into it to feel joy and delight without guilt. And that, I think, is so profound because, if the weather's great today, or you think, well, nobody's bombed me, or, the subway is not on strike, or the world's not falling in, that, there are good things to be found in every day, and to be conscious of that and not feel guilty that Joan is no longer here to enjoy them.
Yes.
Much as I'd long for her to be here. But...
Yes, that kind of love is also permission granting.
Yeah.
And what a beautiful way to think about being loved. It's like,
but she also did. Yeah. She also did the opposite thing, where she went through the 25 single, widowed, or divorced women that we knew together, and basically snacked through the entire corral of them, and just said, "Well, I mean, her ass is far too big for your taste, and her accent would drive you insane, and the way she eats, well, I mean, honestly, her." And the way she flicks her hair all the time, and this one's neuroses. She basically was a lioness and went through everybody who might stake a claim after she had died was, detonated. Been very effective.
Permission given, permission revoked.
Oh, yeah. No, you must find somebody after I'm gone. But if it's any of this lot, this is what the deal is going to be, baby.
You have the most realistic kind of deep and abiding love, and it has been an incredible joy.
She said through teary eyes. Thank you very much, Kate.
Oh,
Thank you.
I like you. Thank you for this.
Thank you very much. And I hope that you're spared a few more breathing moments on the planet, just to drive all those gossips mad and say, "Is she still alive?" "Yes, I hear so."